Good day, people. This is Savage 365 delivering you information on RFIDs. First, you need to understand what an RFID is. RFID is an acronym for Radio Frequency Identification Technology, or radio frequency identification. Everything that we make use of and has been deployed as early as the 60s. Okay, so you have a lot of people talking about the possibility, the onset, or mandatory use of RFID chips enabled in identification in the palm of one's hand and mobile devices, etc. Well, if you don't know, once a conversation begins or a dialogue is initiated, the reality is the use of this has already begun with human research, okay? Human testing. That's the problem. You have people who provide informed consent, whether partially or fully, and they agree to become participants, or as some would say, guinea pigs, in the studying, the implementation, trial and error, meaning the application of methodologies or procedures in a formal study to aid companies who are more likely contractors with the federal government to develop these types of advancements that further limit our private, our private productive and thus peaceful existence. So let me go into detail about how a couple of these companies have helped to reduce and thus eliminate the very small amount of freedom, liberty, and privacy that we have left. And for all you U.S. residents, you passport and or visa holders, I want you to understand the United States has embedded an RFID chip in every U.S. passport and possibly every INS issued identification card since mid to late 2007. Okay, so if you're panicking, if you're frantic, or a little bit paranoid, you might as well relax if you have either or both in your possession and have traveled with it at least once. These RFIDs are marketed, distributed, traded, and again are used in everything in our possession, in our homes, not just from mobile and wireless devices, but your appliances, your stoves, your refrigerators, your vehicles, and the information that is transferred from this almost always includes a photograph, detailed physical descriptions of your anatomy and or physiology, health records, including medical, mental, dental, vitals, etc., your location, and the purpose, the leading purposes of having RFIDs are to identify, locate, track, and thus monitor not just your movements in terms of geolocating, but geospatial, meaning exactly where you are, what you're close to, whom you are close to, and what is happening, what may likely happen. And thus, this is to provide you an idea of how certain events happen. And then there is so much rhetoric, conspiracy theories, as some would say, as reactions. These are the after effects, such as events as 9/11, etc. Because again, if world governments have had access to this type of technology, have made use of this type of technology and thus have the controls for this technology, meaning the core units for observance, such as closed circuit television, when you're talking about live monitoring, or preventative strategies that can be taken, such as secret surveillance. Okay, let's move it over to counterintelligence. So, when you're thinking about behavior and how it is predicated, monitored for, thus can be prevented, again, this brings us back to events such as 9/11, when you know people are under investigation, they are being tracked, traced, monitored, meaning observed, and then something of that nature happens. So it gives the impression that there was the possibility of allowance. Okay, so let's take it a step further. Let's again back to human research, participation, informed consent. Thus, the problem is you have a formal research proposals, then you have the application of methodology, which brings us up to the conclusion or the discussions, and then application in the real world. And then that will definitely have to begin with discussing your developers, your manufacturers, and marketability. All right. When most people talk about RFIDs, they limit their conversations to identification cards. Well, let me tell you something. The Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, and then you have consumer protection agencies stateside in the United States that all work together, collaborate to ensure that they have these types of RFIDs that are applicable across industries, again, in federal settings, private settings, public settings, etc.